Hi everybody, we are going to do a bit of science, and this half term we're going to be looking at plants. We're going to be looking at how plants reproduce. We're going to be looking at their life stages or life cycles. We will get the opportunity to dissect a plant when we're back in school, and hopefully we can build up our knowledge, and that's going to help impact our decision making when we come to look at our garden. Because I know, especially when I was looking into some of this, I learned quite a lot, especially about planting times and things like that. And as you can tell by our learning intention today, to describe the life cycles of different plants, that's what we're going to be looking at today. Now, what do I mean by different plants? By different plants, what I mean is the difference between flowering, so plants that have flowers, and non-flowering plants. Now, I'm going to come into that in a bit more detail. So what are we going to be producing at the end of today? So our activity at the end is going to display some of our learning. Now that could be in the form of an animation. I know especially children in my class, I've had some really good animations that you've done, even if they're random, they're still pretty good. Which relate to the stages of the life cycle of either a flowering plant or a non-flowering plant. Now you can use an animation app, or you can make a flip book. It's up to you. I don't really mind, but it'd be really nice for you to be a bit creative. But if you don't have access to animation app or something, you can always create a diagram and detail and describe the stages in your diagram. Now I'll show you examples of both of these at the end. Also, what I would like, and it would be really helpful for the adults, if you could fill in this table here. So in here you're going to write down right now all of the things that you know. Everything that you think that you know about plants, even if you're not sure if it's right, write down what you know, and over here some things that you would like to find out. It might be, how do I know which plants I can eat and which ones I can't? Which plants will kill me if I eat them? Are there any plants that eat meat? What's the best time for planting? Something along those lines. If there's anything that you want to find out, and the adults will look at it, and hopefully we will get the opportunity to address most of them. So that's what we want by the end of today, but we need to look at some of the information and look at the knowledge around the life cycles or life stages of a plant. So let's have a look at that. So life cycles. Like all living things, plants are living and they go through different stages in life. Now, these stages, don't think of these stages as boxes. They're not boxes. You don't go from this stage into this stage. It's a bit like when we think about timelines. We don't go from this era into another era. Think of it more of a continuum or a number line. So there might be key stages in between, key identifiable stages, but it's a journey through them, and plants could look different within the same stage. So think of them more going along a line rather than being stuck inside of a box. Now the life cycle, as it suggests, it indicates that there's going to be some form of repetition in it. In this, it's going to be the plant growing, then eventually dying, just before that reproducing, and then cycling around. Now it's very similar. It's not the same for flowering and non-flowering plants, but it's very similar. What I want you to do initially is just to have a think about how many examples of flowering and non-flowering plants can you name. Now, you might see some of these on a walk, you might see them in your garden, you may just see them from your window. Wherever you've seen them, you may have seen it in a film. Can you remember what it looks like? Can you remember any names? You might want to draw some. So just note down some examples of flowering and some non-flowering plants. As I say, it could be the names, you could even draw them. So take some time to do that, maybe 5 minutes. If you get really into it and you start drawing, you might take 10. But really have a think about the differences and what are similar. Once you've done, I can't go next. So, as I said previously, the stages are not clearly defined. Don't think of them as boxes, think about them as a journey. There are roughly 5 main stages, and as I've said, there are some slight differences between the two. They are very slight. We still go through the same number of stages. I don't want to spoil it too much, because on this one here we have flowering plants over here, and we have non-flowering plants. What I want you to do is just have a look at what you notice. If you're struggling to read these diagrams, you'll see here we have the name of the plant. Here we have the stage number, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here we have the name of the stage. You're probably thinking it probably should be underlined. And here we have a brief description of sort of the journey towards the next stage. So it needs to go through this to get onto this next stage. So have a look at them both. What I want you to do is just to note down what is similar between these two. So flowering and non-flowering. What is different? And can you make any generalizations? Now, generalizations, we do it in maths, are just sort of statements or sentences which could either be mostly true or mostly not true. It's very general. So you might say, I've noticed that both of these types of plants go through 5 stages. That's a general statement. Are there any generalizations we can make? It might be that they're both going to die at some point. It might be that they both need to reproduce in some way. So note them down. You may want to put them into a little table. It's up to you how you want to display them. So right then, once you've written a few down for each and really explored what's similar, give them a read. Please unpause the video and then move on. So let's look here. Let's take, for example, a flowering plant. So this is the plant which is going to produce a flower at some point. We can see it goes through 5 stages. Interestingly, we know that a non-flowering plant also goes through 5 stages. We can see our first stage is germination, then the roots begin to grow, then the leaves, then it starts to flower, and then its seeds are dispersed. So that's its way of reproducing and restarting the cycle, because this seed down here has fallen off, and it's then going to start to grow again. So you might think it's not really a cycle, it seems to be more like a spiral, because it almost moves on, sort of moves on to the next place. But hey, it's just a simple way of explaining something. So our first stage, germination. This is when the seed starts to grow, when the conditions are suitable. So it's in the ground, it needs certain conditions, it needs certain things to be perfect. Can you think about what those factors might be? So there are 4 of them. Excuse the noise, just sorting my iPad out. What do you think those 4 factors or 4 conditions might be? I'll give you a clue. One of them is moisture. And that is talking about the amount of water in the soil. There can't be too much, there can't be too little. Another one is temperature. Another one is temperature. Some plants need it to be colder, some need it to be warmer. Another one is the amount of light. And then access to air. Some plants need it, some plants don't. Now, a seed, generally speaking, will need a certain amount of each of these. Now, that differs from different seeds, because just like people, seeds are different. But generally speaking, we're going to need all 4 of these for the seeds to start to germinate. And that's when these little sprouts are starting to come out of the seed. Next stage, we've got the roots. This is where our roots begin to grow. So our roots serve, well, I say our roots, the roots of plants serve different purposes. There are two main ones that I can think of. Can you think of the two main reasons why they would need roots? So pause the video, write some down. So the first one that I can think of is to get nutrients. It's to get food out of the soil into the plant. So all the nutrients, it might be in the soil, it might be in the water, there it's going to get soaked in to the roots, and then it's going to go on a journey up there into the seed where it can start to use to grow. And number two, think about a tree and how big trees' roots are. What they really do is they anchor a plant into the ground. I really noticed that lots and lots and lots of weeds, especially a weed is just a plant who grows where it shouldn't be. When I was weeding my garden, when I moved in and I was clearing all the mess that was in there, the weeds can go on forever, and it makes it really hard to pull out, and they really anchor these into the soil. And think about if a tree didn't have any roots, it would just fall over. So for anchor and for nutrients. Next up, we've got our leaves. So we've got our stem here, and that is used to support. Think of it like a skeleton. It helps the plant grow in a certain direction. Generally speaking, that's towards light. And then we have our leaves. Now the leaves are what help our plant produce its own food. Now it does that through a process called photosynthesis. They take in light comes into the leaves, and in the leaves I believe it turns the sunlight into sugar, and then they use sugar to grow, and the stem helps to transport nutrients and things all around the plant where it needs to go. So it's a really important stage. You're starting to become a little bit more independent, I guess. And here is where our flowering and our non-flowering plants start to diverge a little bit. Our flowering plants need to produce a flower, and within the flower, pollen is used to make seeds. Have a think about it. Lots of flowers have bright petals. Why might petals need to be bright colours? Because we've just had Valentine's Day. If you saw any flowers there, generally speaking, we buy flowers because they're quite bright. But why would a flower need bright petals? If you think about it, if the flower is making seeds, it needs a way for those seeds to be dispersed. So it needs, number one, it might attract animals to come and eat it. That in the case of things like fruit, normally, lots of the time, the flower then turns into fruit. But it needs to attract what we call pollinators. Now, pollinators spread pollen and help plants to reproduce. So that's why there needs to be bright colours to attract insects. And in some cases, it's the opposite. It's to detract, stop them to being eaten and things. And I saw a plant in a video under a UV light, and it had a really strong UV signal. So that's a lot of how some of the insects can see it. But if we're looking at non-flowering plants, we're starting to produce seeds on our leaves. So if we're doing non-flowering, they are now producing seeds. And we'll cover in a little bit more detail in later lessons how that happens without the use of animals and things like that. Last up, we've got seed dispersal I've sort of put seed dispersal and seed production sort of into the same one for flowering, but non-flowering, it would definitely be seed dispersal. So seed dispersal is where we're starting to, it's really important for plants to spread out their seeds. If you think about a plant, it cannot move. A plant is taking all of its food from the same space. Yeah, this plant cannot move. It needs all of its food around here. Now, if a seed drops down and then starts growing here, now we've got two plants fighting for the same nutrients. It needs to spread them away so there's a bigger gap. Now, dispersal is talking about how plants spread. How many different methods of seed dispersal can you name? Now, I remember one, and we looked at it when we went on the fields near the beginning of term and we were doing our sketching of plants. We found some sycamore seeds, and they looked a little bit like that. Looks a little bit like, you might call them helicopter seeds. That's one way, because we could use the wind, so the wind can blow it. How else? You may have been through the parks and things in the summer. You get all those sticky balls from the grass. They stick to you. You might have darts. I remember being in trouble in school, going around throwing the little grass darts at other children and getting stuck on them, and it was all fun and games. But yeah, they get stuck on animals, those sorts of things. We've got things like fruits and berries where birds especially eat them and then fly away and then poo them out. Animal, there's lots of different ways. So well done if you were able to name some of these. You may even have things like coconuts which float. There's lots of different ways that seeds can be dispersed. Explosions, as in poppy seeds, I believe. So, we've looked at the different stages. We've got our 5 main stages. I'm going to go back to this one. What I would like you to do is to create a diagram. It could be a diagram which is very similar to this, or an animation which shows how the life cycle or the life stages of plants. Here is an example of an animation that you might do. So we go back to the beginning. It might be starting to grow, it's starting to germinate. They're growing, and then the stem is, I put a flower, I mean it's quite clearly not a flower, that would have been the leaf stage. I should probably change that, but that should be the leaf stage. The diagram you might want to have a go at. Here I've just got the basic stages, germination, roots grow, leaves grow, flowers grow, and seeds are dispersed, all seeds are produced, and then dispersed by animals. And what I would do is, inside that, the conditions. I need the correct moisture level, warmth or temperature. Now, it can be basic like this, but the more effort that you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it. That's very wonky. So, add a little bit more information there. A nice labelled diagram. So I've got the name of the stages, but I could go in there and add in some more detail. I will really looking forward to seeing what you come up with. Please use... PowerPoint's restarting. But please use all the help that you can get. Really important as well is the what I know and what I want to find out. It's really important for us as adults. So we need to know, what do we need to teach you? Because is there any point teaching you something that you already know? No, there isn't. And what is it that you're interested in finding out?